Yeah, I'll kick it off. I'm calling from the west coast of Ireland in Donegal. Out in front of me is the Atlantic Ocean, where I grew up and learned to surf at Resnala Beach. And yeah, where are you, Hanli?
I'm in Cape Town, South Africa, and I'm looking out over what's technically still also the Atlantic Ocean, so we are connected by that. But I am on the eastern side of Cape Point, so it's also sort of the Indian Ocean because it's a warm current. So for those who are listening who've been to Cape Town, you know the confusion about our Indian versus our Atlantic. But the kelp forest is right here, and it's a winter's day in Cape Town, South Africa.
Which is like a summer's day in Ireland, yeah.
Yes.
Tom, what about you? Where are you at?
Yeah, I'm in St Agnes on the north coast of Cornwall, UK, and it's a summer's day here, which is about the same temperature as a winter day in Cape Town. It's a sort of grey, 16 degrees. You have this sort of weather phenomena Easkey is familiar with called mizzle, where it's like it's not raining, but it's like there's loads of the air's wet and it's low clouds, and it's been like that most of the day. I'm the founder of Finisterre. So Finisterre is located here in St Agnes on the site of an old tin mine. Again, very lucky. The sea is 250 meters away, just over the cliff there. I went for a sea swim before I came on the call. And yeah, it's sort of summer's in full flow. And I looked out and I could see right and up there, Easkey would be up that way. So yeah, up north, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. So, I mean, in terms of access to the ocean, I think we're all incredibly lucky where we're situated. I'm so excited to dive into the different ways we're exploring this in what we do and how we do it. So how do we do this?
Why don't you start, East? Why don't you give a little bit of a background to, your, I guess, a little bit of your aquatic history, and then also how that brought you to your passion for your work and your passion for your academia. Because, I mean, you really are an interesting blend of a very nature-embedded academic, and I just love that about you. So share a little bit about how you ended up there.
Yeah, I think it's 100% fueled by my curiosity. I think this session before us was exploring a lot about around creativity. And for me, that's having this relationship with the ocean has really fueled that curiosity that spilled over into all these other aspects of my life. So I'm a bit of a hybrid. I'm a lifelong surfer. I learned to surf from age of 4 in the cold waters of the northwest coast of Ireland, born to surfing parents. And that was kind of love at first sight. And ever since then, it's been shaping and influencing pretty much every aspect of my life. And I have followed it as a competitive surfer for a long time. I'm also an ambassador with Finisterre for probably the last 10 years. And yeah, I've been on an interesting kind of journey with it. I think for me, also then as an academic, was my way to better explore and understand our human relationship with the ocean, and having, had such a deep connection with the ocean from an early age, wanting to understand what is that connection like for others, how do we reconnect it where it's been lost, really realizing that it's that human dimension, especially when it comes to ocean conservation, it is so important to consider of how we value and connect with the ocean, how we understand it, and just how diverse that is, which kind of determines the success or failure of these outcomes when we're trying to seek ocean solutions. So for me, it was about that recognizing the value of when we deepen that, especially emotional connection with the ocean, is a really important part of this journey that we're all on with the changes that we're facing. And I know is integral to the work that we all do, especially yours, Hanli, with I Am Water. And yeah, right now I kind of work as a PhD in environment and society. So I work as a blue health researcher, looking in particular the links between water, especially ocean health and human health, and the sea's power to heal. And I currently, I'm a researcher with INCLUSEA, EU project with 7 different organizations, mostly surf therapy organizations in Europe, looking at creating a more inclusive, accessible ocean for people with physical disabilities by working on the ground at the grassroots level to develop a methodology and best practices for surf instructors and surf schools to make surfing and access to the ocean accessible for all bodies. And yeah, and then I also like to write about those experiences. So a session later on this evening today at Sea Change, I'll be doing a live reading of my new book, Saltwater in the Blood, which is my way of trying to, translate those lessons learned, especially from surfing. Such a powerful metaphor for life, and that's kind of what the book is about. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now, I think, in a nutshell.
That's great. It's always so good to remind ourselves of where it all began, right? I mean, I'm so jealous that you started surfing at 4. Oh my gosh. I mean, I probably think at 4 you were surfing better than I'm surfing now, but I just need to get more time on my board. Yeah, so following on that, Tom, do you want to dive into a little bit of your story and how you ended up where you are with Finisterre today?
Yeah, sure. And yeah, I always love hearing that story, Easkey. And there's so much more to it, with your family's history, and it goes where it's amazing. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, and also being part of our journey as well. So Tom Kay, I founded Finisterre nearly 20 years ago now, here in Snagness in Cornwall, and it was really like Hanli Easkey, kind of my journey in terms of being connected to the sea really started with how I was brought up, and it was something my parents wanted to instill in me. They literally had a conversation about what they would like their children, my sister and I, to have as a kind of part of their life, and one of them was the love of the sea. And so I was really lucky that it was on the north coast of Norfolk. It was boats, it was windsurfing, it was all those sort of things. It was always around the sea. And then when I was about 15, 16, in those sort of formative years of your life when people get into music or team sports or art, and I was never really good at any of those, and was always kind of a bit of an outlier, I really kind of found surfing, and it was sort of became everything I did, my identity. I had hair back then. All of the bad 90s dress code was going on. The hair was pretty bad as well. So that was kind of my life, really. And it's sort of surfing around this coastline and in Ireland that I really knew and loved. So it was cold, it was windy, it was rainy. The conditions changed in an instant. But I loved the romance of it, and the and the experience, and the sort of depth of experience, this connection that I really had to the world that I was in. I went to university of marine biology, and then left and worked in London for a year and a half. And like a lot of people, or actually not so much nowadays, but back then didn't really know what I wanted to do, and worked in London a year and a half. And it was like one of those things where I think you take away something from someone's life, you really realize what it is that you miss and you love and you need. And I realized it was around this connection to sea. And up to that point in my life, it had always been about passion of the sea, and it had always been there. And maybe I hadn't realized I appreciated it so much, but when it wasn't there, I suddenly realized it was missing. So I started a brand around connecting people to the sea, emotively connecting people to the sea. And it was a brand, a business, making sustainable and innovative products around enabling a connection to the sea. I called it Finisterre, which means Land's End, end of the earth. And it's a BBC Radio 4 shipping forecast area. And that was 20 years ago now. And yeah, we had some really strong guiding sort of true north principles from a business point of view about commitment to product, environment, and people. And it's funny, it just feels like we're even 20 years in, we're just getting going now on the power of brand and community, and how we can inspire love of the sea. And connect people to sea, and then if you emotionally connect something to someone, you protect what you love. And that's kind of what we're here to as a business, as a brand, and that's bigger than all of us here put together, and something that will live on long after I've gone. So that's the hope of the business, and super privileged to be here talking to you all, and work at Easkey and Hanli and many other people doing amazing stuff in the field. And it's always good when parallel universes collide like this, whether it's academia or charity work. Yeah, that's my story. And so yeah, it's still working up as I go, working out as I go along. But it's because I wasn't a businessman or that sort of thing. But the business now, 150 people in the business. We've got 9 stores around the country. We're B Corp certified, and just set a foundation up. So we'll talk about more later. But it's my life's work basically, and great to be talking to you about it today and what the power of the brand in terms of connecting people to sea can do.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. It's so, we were saying earlier before the session that we're so, Tom and Easkey and myself, we're so aligned around our vision of connecting people to the ocean and how we believe that it's that connection that can foster change. And my background is similar in that it was very close to nature, but I didn't grow up by the sea. I grew up on a horse farm in the middle of South Africa, and the ocean was very, very far away. But I was lucky in that we had a couple of rivers and a farm dam, so I could early on explore my body in water, so to speak. But it was later on during my studies that I actually discovered freediving, and I became a competitive freediver. And for several years, I competed in freediving, and everything was around how long I could hold my breath, how deep I could dive. And I was fascinated with the human body in water. I was fascinated with what I thought was impossible one day became possible the next day, and learning about how the human body has the same mammalian dive response that whales and dolphins and seals have. So really understanding that the connection we have with the sea isn't only a philosophical, hypothetical, it's a truly physical connection. And I think it's something that Easkey dives into even more detail in her studies. But for me, just learning the actual physiological adaptations we had that allowed me to dive much, much deeper than I thought I ever could really inspired me. And I had the opportunity as a competitive freediver to really travel around the world and see very beautiful places and incredibly inspiring animals and oceans. And having done that for a long time, my work and my passion within, before coming back to South Africa, I was working as a documentary filmmaker, looking really at social political challenges, especially in Africa. And then coming home to South Africa, having these two backpacks on, so to speak, the competitive freediver with a deep love of the sea and the social political filmmaker thinking, you know, what are the main issues facing Africa and where is the hope? Where is the hope? Because I kept feeling that Africa is a continent full of hope, but the stories I was hearing when I was traveling were always ones of hopelessness and not really very enlightening. And so coming back to South Africa, I was really deeply saddened to experience that our beaches and our ocean were still as divided as they had been when I was growing up in the 80s, when South Africa was still very much under the apartheid rule, where beaches were for whites only, swimming pools were for whites only, in a country where the whites were a small minority. And so coming back to South Africa, seeing that this was still the case, I just realized that, you know, deeper dives and more records really don't matter when the majority of the people in the country I love greatly don't have access to this thing I love so much. And so that was the impetus for me to start the I Am Water Foundation and to work with getting children to have ocean experiences. And most of those are first-time ocean experiences. And I started I Am Water 10 years ago. And we are now into our 11th year and working with thousands of children from underserved coastal communities who have never had access to actually stepping into the ocean. And because of this lack of access that we've seen in South Africa, there's generations of fear. So it's not just access as in, are they close to the beach? The communities we work with are walking distance to the beach. And exactly what you're saying, Jean, is that they don't even know how to swim. So in South Africa, we have terrifying statistics that less than 15% of South Africans can swim. There are more than 600 children a year who drown. So the work we do is about overcoming deep transgenerational fears, increasing access, and also working with water safety. So really trying to solve many problems at once. And then a final outcome, one of the biggest outcomes, is instilling a love of the sea and starting to be able to talk about conservation. So that's the I Am Water Ocean Conservation Foundation here in South Africa, where, yeah, access to the sea really is an ongoing challenge, but something that can be solved. And that's really exciting. It's not something we can sit back and be hopeless about. I think that's what Tom and Easkey and I find in our work, is that this very big question that we're all trying to solve in different ways, that we really find hope through the work that we're doing and what we're seeing and the engagement and the support we're seeing. And I think for all of us, that's really important, is that, you know, you want to keep instilling hope, because I think that that's something the water teaches us. And I think maybe, I mean, having shared all of that at Easkey, it would be so interesting to go back to hearing a little bit more of some of the research you've done and those deep connections and what the ocean can really do for these kind of, really troubled locations.
Yeah, every time you hear you speak, it just like sparks such excitement, and then so many connections. What I think is also remarkable is that you can feel the challenges we face right now. It may feel overwhelming, but what you're talking about, Hanli, is this 10-year journey, and Tom with Finisterre, 20-year one. But like what can be achievable within a decade is just remarkable. So that gets me really excited about the work I know that we need to do in now less than 10 years, if we not to totally overshoot our earthly limits, but it's really possible, and it's already happening. And so, just to add on, build on what you're sharing, you know, I think when we think of the ocean, it's often this notion or concept of there's, you know, freedom is associated with it. This idea that, you know, our beaches, seas, and coasts are some of the most freely accessible public spaces still available to us in many parts of the world, but they're not equally accessible. And neither is their presence simply enough to encourage active engagement, as we've heard from Hanli, because coastal spaces, I mean, they're so shaped by how we value, how we perceive them. And for so many, they're experienced as exclusionary, risky, unsafe, unwelcoming, or simply inaccessible. And it's why like programs like I Am Water, and I'm thinking back to also 10 years ago, the journey with women surfing in Iran, and that sport being initiated somewhere like that, again, from the grassroots, of how a space can get transformed that was once risky and unsafe into this real place of discovery, empowerment that builds confidence. If you can create like what I Am Water is doing, and passing on these essential water safety skills, is it's creating this enabling safe space, which is really important, because the sea is unpredictable and risky and dangerous. But when we approach it in this way and create this way of connecting with it, it's so profound. And the reason why it matters so much, and I see this in my research, is what comes up again and again and what people share. I've researched with many diverse groups of people, in particular in the ocean therapy contexts, but all around the world. And it comes up again and again, why water? And this sentiment is echoed, that the sea is a place to be free from judgment. You know, once we're immersed in it, we get to be all of who we are. We're in this salty embrace that Hanli speaks to, is part of our evolutionary biology, in our bodies. So we're floating free. We're untethered quite literally from those earthly limits. And there is then that sense of, that freedom of being, but also being held, I think, in salt water in particular. And then cold water adds to that, right? Because you have this feeling of absolute presence and bodily connection in cold water. But it's really important because it opens up a world of possibilities, and it sparks this curiosity for those who otherwise wouldn't have access to it. And that's essential, that we have that kind of diversity, people having this ocean connection. Because just think of, I love how Dr. Ayanna Johnson speaks to this as well, and really advocates for the greater access we have for a greater diversity of people leads to much more diversity in the field of marine science, how research gets designed, more effective ocean conservation. If we have, that kind of diversity of people addressing these ocean issues, if they're as diverse as the coastal communities that are dependent on the seas, and so on, it's as beneficial to have that diversity as it is the biological diversity, I guess is what I'm getting at too. And then of course that connection through direct experience increases empathy and care, and speaks to what you were saying, Tom, that we protect what we love.
Yeah, I think it'd be really, because I think it's all of these problems we're facing can seem hugely daunting, and there's there's a danger that it could be too daunted to think about it. So I'd love for you to share, which I've heard before, both of you, like, so since you've been doing your work, say Easkey in Iran or Hanli in South Africa, over the period of time, just can you share some examples or those stories where you have embarked on a journey that on the face of it would be like, how am I ever going to affect change here? Or it may have seemed really daunting, but these small steps, anything's possible. So I love the audience to hear a few of those stories and showing how with belief and passion and honesty and vulnerability and being brave and all these things, you really can bring about the change you're shooting for. I don't know if Easkey, you want to go first with, I don't know if Iran's the best example you've got, I don't know, but it's I love that story. Yeah.
It's a remarkable story. So the surfing in Iran kind of initiated back in 2013 with a group of remarkable Iranian sportswomen and captured in that documentary Into the Sea by Mariam Poiseau. And it's just been this really unexpected journey to see how it's changed that relationship with the sea, but also of women and their bodies and this empowerment of being in this space of discovery through something like surfing. But of course, there being so many barriers, and one in particular, I think, and we see that in the sports industry a lot, and in particular surfing, around how we get portrayed as a woman who surfs, and the options we have available to us, in particular in terms of what we wear in terms of performance sportswear. So one of the design challenges that came out of, going over and back to Iran for a number of years over the last decade, and through a really collaborative approach along with Finisterre, we've been working on designing what's called the sea suit over the last number of years. We're on the second prototype that's being tested. And it's just a way to, I suppose, think about how we want to be and how we want to feel in the water. It isn't just about the clothing, but that really it's about removing any and all barriers that we can. And it's a huge impact. I suppose the issue is in something like surfing, there's a very narrow vision or portrayal of who is a surfer. In the media in particular. And so it was a way to kind of challenge that and to go, actually, there's a real diversity of women who surf in particular in terms of our bodies and how we want to be portrayed and how we want to look. But I suppose the design challenge there was finding something that was functional, that you could surf in, that also was modest and not a bikini, not a wetsuit. And so the sea suit is a way to kind of address that. But part of the process has been so amazing. It's been really creative. It's the design challenge aspect to create performance sportswear for really expanding the range and diversity of women who surf. In this context, it was inspired by Iranian women and Muslim women, but realizing through this journey that actually it's for loads of different reasons. We want more choice of what we want to be able to wear in the water and how it makes us feel. And so it also helped create an incredible community. So through this discussion, it's just sparked, there's women surfing in the most unexpected parts of the world, as well as in the UK, with a really big British Muslim community. So it's been this really wonderful sense of sisterhood as the sport of surfing grows, and just opening an interesting conversation space. So that's one small example. Hanli, what about, I'd love to hear more of what's happening with I Am Water now and what's next.
Yeah, so one of our, I think when you have a vision, it's so true. Like, you can have a vision of what you want it to look like, but that doesn't mean you have the answer of how to get there. And I definitely experienced that as a founder of an organization that, had this vision of like oceans for all, and, wanting to get, like hundreds and thousands of children to experience the ocean. But coming from a competitive freediving space and from a water safety space, I was like, I can only take 4 people into the water. I cannot handle more than that. And if I'm not there, somebody's going to drown, So I had like this immediate block, like, how am I going to get this to be more? And I didn't have the answers to that. And luckily, I had people in my network, and in my close environment who said, no, of course we can. We need to just train people properly how to do this. And so that's really how, for me, one of the big things in unlocking how we were able to get more children in the water was starting to train coaches from the local communities where these children are from, these coastal communities. And to date, IMWater's trained over 100 coaches, and over 50 of those work with the organization on an ongoing basis. And for many of those, it's their only income and job. So what for me was the problem of how are we going to get more kids in the water safely. The solution was we train coaches from local communities who come working. And one of the unexpected outcomes is that we're creating jobs for youth in South Africa, where in the youth sector in South Africa, youth is considered 18 to 30, and we have over 50% unemployment within the sector, which is on its own a huge challenge for a country like ours. And so I think that's really, for me, like one of our real, I get so happy, you know, we have like this wall of Polaroid photos of all the coaches working with the organization. And it makes me so happy every time I walk past it, because I know that these are young men and women who are committed to sharing the ocean with children from their communities. And it's also creating a job opportunity for them. And I think that was like really the opportunity for IMWater to start scaling in Cape Town. And now, you know, in a season here in Cape Town, we working with over 4,000 children, you know, so it's really able to get a lot of children in the water who've never been in the water before. And then I think the question for me is always, and I think it ties in a little bit with what Charles's question was in the chat as well, you know, that we're at a tipping point and it's crunch time for our ocean now. And so, you know, I think being so purpose and passion driven, I'm always thinking, what's next? What's more? What more can we do? What's next? What's more? You know, what more can we do? And how can we get more and more people to have this experience, and especially in communities and places where there isn't equal access to the ocean. And, you know, I think as people hear about IMWater, we get emails from all over the world and people reaching out to us on social media and asking, you know, how can we do what IMWater is doing here? How can we do this here? And, you know, we have the same problem here in the Maldives. We have something similar happening in Patagonia. We have this happening in Hong Kong, and we have all these people reaching out to us. And in the past, we've always been a little bit like, well, we can try and advise you, or careful of this, or try this, or, you know, do this. And we've just decided this year that we're launching a project where we'll be connecting with organizations who want to offer something similar to what IMWater is doing in South Africa, and open sourcing everything that we've learned and being able to actually train organizations and individuals to deliver the IMWater kind of program, but within their own organization. Because the last thing I want to do is build a sort of like an amnesty of IMWater. We have local chapters around the world where absolutely everything is going towards, you know, admin and overheads, and you become this top-heavy organization. I think what the world really needs is more local heroes doing good work in their communities, and communities supporting that, and really seeing conservation and hopeful ocean access coming from communities. But there needs to be support and training for that to really start flying. And I think that that's a super exciting opportunity. And we're calling it the Oceans for All Alliance, and busy with our first cohort of organizations who will be trained here in Cape Town to be able to offer this program around the world. And I just can't wait to see more people open their eyes underwater for the first time and feel that sense of connection that Easkey speaks of, and that incredible privilege it is for all of us that have this access to the ocean, that it's so easy to forget. And I think that for me, keep coming back to, you know, like, especially there's, you know, you just open any news app and you feel like, oh my God, where do I start, right? And the reality is just we have to be bold and brave enough to keep caring, and we have to be bold and brave enough to keep trying, because it's only over when we say it's over. And it's not over for the ocean. Like, that's one thing we know. That is one resilient piece of freaking blue water. But our actions matter, and our actions matter now. And I think that's why it's really important to collaborate and to really go for this. And I think I get excited when, you know, Tom speaks about the position of business and brands doing, you know, using their voice and their position, because there's certain problems that can be solved by nonprofits, but it's a bit of an upward struggle, but we will keep going because there are problems that can only be solved in this way. But there are some problems that can and must be solved through better business, and brands play a big role in that. And I've always been very, very proud of, you know, how Finisterre has built that into their very core. And it'll be interesting to hear, Tom, you know, I think where you're at now with Finisterre, you're at a place where you can think of, you know, even bigger picture of sharing and giving back. And it would be really, really great to hear a little bit about of your next steps. And then we're coming back to your next steps, Easkey, because I know it's another book, but I'm sure it's some more research and other work.
Yeah, thanks, Hanli, and yeah, love listening to your story, and over the time you've done it and where it's going, and it's just super exciting. I mean, it's just it's so much going on. So yeah, I think, you know, as I said, I started Finisterre 20 years ago, and it's been a pretty bumpy journey from a business point of view. Like, I'm not a businessman; it nearly hasn't happened many times, and you know, behind. But you know, this is what I love doing most, talking about this sort of stuff. But behind all the stuff, you can probably see there's a living, breathing business with great people in it, all fighting, to survive. So it's been quite a long journey. But yeah, I think this year we've really started to lean into what the business is here to do and really have a big voice. We did a great event about 2 months ago called C7. At the same time G7 was on, we did C7, and the sort of thinking was, whilst the global superpowers are down the road here in Cornwall, we would run our own event. And it was an ocean activist training camp, and Hanli and Easkey were involved, which was amazing. And the idea was that it was about using a brand to really inspire the ocean activist in any of us. And actually, do you know what? The people on this panel, they get it, and probably listening, they get it. It's about, you know, connecting people that are a long way from the ocean, you know, maybe inland. And we got asked that question a lot. How can I live in London or wherever, you know, in Birmingham, whatever it is in the UK, and how can I play my part sort of thing. So it's really about, you know, saying, listen, the ocean activist journey can start anywhere for anyone, anytime. It's just being about as brave as you can be. And what we'd like to do as a brand is show you how you could do that. And the majority of people, you know, you've obviously got people that maybe are, you know, with Captain Paul Watson on a Sea Shepherd ship, which is amazing. But I think a lot of people would look at that and go, wow, that's really great, but I'm here with my family in, you know, Reading or wherever it is. How I want to be involved, but how can I be involved? So really, C7 was about that, and it was about using a brand to really to connect to community and hopefully inspire a load of ocean activist journeys. And do you know what? The majority of people are sort of 1 or 2 on a scale of 10 in beginning that journey and making it accessible. And then at the same time, we've also just launched the foundation, which is a really big moment for me as a business, and I want to do for a long time. And it is the sole aim of it is to champion ocean access for all, because like we said at the start, incredibly lucky to be able to walk out of my desk like I did, walk down the cliff, go for a swim and come back, and I can physically do that. I can do it. I have confidence to do it. I get in the water. I'm culturally confident to be able to go in the water. There's a lot of kids in the water. The majority of people in the water are men. It's, there's all these sort of barriers around ocean access on many different levels that need to be broken down. And starting local, as Hanli said, is a really big thing. So big point in time for us, and we just, as I said, we're 20 years, but we just feels like getting started on this journey. And success for me is when people have met through maybe events or things that we've done and have begun that journey, connected, and gone off on a whole different, they've become evangelists themselves. And if we can, I suppose we're all talking about this in many shapes and forms through the work that Easkey does and Hanli does. It's about replicating what we understand from our connection to the sea. I'm doing it to Finisterre, Easkey's doing it through her work and her research and her books, and Hanli's doing it through Iron Water. And it's about using that experience we have and sort of breeding more evangelists to go and tell that story and share that connection. So yeah, exciting times, and yeah, it's always a privilege to sort of hear what you two are up to as well. So yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, and I think maybe it might be fun to engage and get some questions from the audience. So if you have some, put them in the chat, or we can bring you onto the screen too. I see Gabby's still there, so we can bring your video on too. And I guess I just wanted to add on that, and maybe speaks to the previous question we've had in the chat too around, what can we do? There's all this energy and appetite to take action, which is remarkable. But I don't think there is any one action. And I really appreciate, again, going back to Dr. Ayana Johnson, amazing and marine biologist and climate policy expert and advocate in the States, but how she speaks to that and I look at it, each of us and our stories, and what I'm hearing is that we're finding what we really love doing, what we're super passionate about, and bringing the skills we have, the things that we're really good at, to the most burning issue, to what like the ocean really needs. And so I think it's for each of us, it's like finding what that mix is. It's like those three elements of like asking and digging into like, what am I most passionate about? Like moving from your heart, and what you care most about, then drawing on the skills and talents and resources you already have, whatever they may be, and meeting then the need that the ocean has, and bringing others into the space, finding your others who are working in that space as well already, on a cause that you really care about. Because as Tom says, and what Hanli's talking about, it's all about building community around this. That's what gives it the momentum that we need. And that's kind of where I'm, as a researcher, positioning myself kind of in this hybrid space where with the INCLUSEA project, is being able to bring my research or academic skills and capacities into the space of meeting the need of surf therapy organizations on the ground to evidence the impact, to develop, again, better solutions to create greater access in the ocean space. So I'll leave it at that. And I think, we'll jump into we've got some questions coming in. Great.
Yeah, I saw the one from Andrew here on the open source trainings, and you're so right, Andrew. And for us at IMWater, it's something we work on continually, and we also have created curriculums for schools here in South Africa, and we've signed a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Education, which is huge. So there's a lot of open source going on. I think when it comes to, when you're working with people in the water, there's certain things that just can't be taught online, that you want to have in-person trainings. And then I also think that it's fine, access is an interesting thing. Like, we really saw that through all the lockdowns here in South Africa, where, a small percentage of the country could continue to learn online in different ways, but the vast majority of the country just does not have an online. There is no online in most communities here. So I think that is something that we really want to see change. We really want to see that change. And sometimes training has to also happen in person. And I think there's also something that happens with community building and with sharing of challenges and sharing of ideas when you're actually part of a community in that way. So I think there's a solution in a hybrid, in some things being completely open source and available. And I think, I saw Lindsay Hawken, I don't know if she's able to stay for the whole session, but Lindsay and Protect Blue work on a lot of those kind of fantastic materials as well with open sourcing and online. And I think that's definitely something that we at IMWater want to see how we can be a part of more, but also physically training people to offer safe in-water experiences also. For sure.
Yeah, I love that. And then speaking to the open source thing, I mean, it's a huge responsibility when science and academia to really get out of the ivory tower and share the knowledge, but also create more space to bring in diverse knowledges and ways of understanding the ocean as well. And a lot of Western science is really catching up with what's already been known by our ancestors and indigenous, very much alive in indigenous cultures still. So there's that, and there is moves to make more of the research open source, and I mean that's ongoing issue as well, and it's so important. I also see Chris here, director from the International Surf Therapy Organization, which is another example again of working towards open source, of sharing best practices, and again sharing and collating all the research so we can learn from each other. I think Gabby, we're going to bring you on. I hope that was the intention. So we'd love to hear from you as well.
And I loved hearing
maybe not.
Taylor Barry sharing about, the kelp forests and involving your local community. I think that does come a little bit to what you were saying, what you were asking, Charles, about what we can do right now with the ocean being at a tipping point, and I'm not going to sit here and together with the others list the greatest challenges facing our ocean, because then we can get into what I always feel is like a conversation that should be entitled the Armageddon of the ocean, because that's really one way of feeling quite heavy. But I do think that we just have to be way more thoughtful, and in everyday choices realize, how can I in my everyday choices be a better custodian? And it's often the more uncomfortable things, the small actions, the what we eat from the sea, the what we buy, is it slow or fast fashion? Is it, what's the packaging? I mean, all those things come together, right? And then, of course, the biggest one of all, and how do my actions affect climate change? And so I think it is like a kind of there is an element of pick your battles. And I like the sentiment of if everybody just does a little bit, but I feel like that sentiment really had its place 40 years ago. I think right now the sentiment should be if everybody does a whole lot and keep talking about it and keep the topic on the table, because I think it's very easy to start feeling overwhelmed with everything that goes on in our everyday lives. And, there just isn't a time to be shelving the topic right now. So I think that's really making sure that it's so much in your DNA that your every decision and your every conversation has a little bit of flavor to it that's salty.
Yeah, and I like that. And a way of looking at it, sort of building on actually a conversation we had yesterday, particularly with Wallace J. Nichols and Blue Mind, but it's something around, say, within a business even, of doing this kind of ocean audit, of looking at the touch points and along your say business and everything that you do. What is the impact on the ocean, regardless of where you are? So again, it comes back again, I suppose, to relationship with climate, water, air, atmosphere, ocean. It's also kind of complexly intertwined and interdependent. But what I like about that is even just, especially I think the water, because it's ultimately all going to go to the ocean. It's even starting there, what's my relationship with water in the day to day? What can I do for my water, my local water? Getting to know it and understand it. How is it? What's its sort of health status? What quality is it? And then what can you do at that level to take action? Actually has a huge effect when you scale out from that. But from a business level, I'm not a fan of the word audit personally, but ocean audit is a great way to flip that on its head. I like that. I can't quite remember where I got that from, but so shifting our perspective in that way and realizing every action we do every day is going to ultimately have an impact on the ocean, which means there's also all these multitude of opportunities to do something, right?
There's a cool bit that in Wallace's C7 sort of session he had, and I think he obviously gets this question quite a lot. I'm in the middle of this city, whatever, in the middle of America, whatever, and he was like, well, anyone can go and find a body of water, more or less than quarter of an hour, whatever it is from where they live. It's around everywhere. So he was like, go and find it, go and see what state it's in, can you get to it in the first place, and really sort of protect it. And it was that was a really lovely way of putting that. And I think it's interesting the role of activism, because I'm quite aware that means a different thing to different people. And so I don't think you never want to be in a situation where you feel that you're being judged for the level of activism that is applicable to your life. So we always talk about it's about being, to Hanli's point, it's about being as radical as you can be in your daily life. And that might mean maybe I'm 20 and carefree and I'm going to go and join Sea Shepherd, or maybe I'm, you know, a different part of my life with different responsibilities, and it's harder to do that, but I can still take action. But there is a sort of bravery and a sort of a step out of the comfort zone that you need to be. So we often talk about that, you know, be as radical as you can be in your own world. And I think that's the sort of thing, I suppose, we looked at with C7 is it's really there's a sort of scale of activism there, and people at various points on that journey, and how can you help people sort of through the door. And by the way, a lot of people are just starting it and understanding it and trying to take daily actions. And there's some, you know, amazing sort of quotes around, you know, a small change is never, you know, is a step in the right direction, and never underestimate the power of what you can do in these daily changes. And you know, because often, you know, we all probably get daunted by, as Hanli says, you open the app up and the news app, and it's pretty grim reading, particularly right now. And you know, the sort of feeling of helplessness, can easily come through. So it's about being positive, brave, honest, hopeful, I think, ultimately. And there's the hope element, I think, is a powerful one for anyway, so a bit of a ramble, but around the houses. But there's water around you wherever you are, and you can go and find it, as in the words of Wallace.
And there's a couple of great comments coming up too. I love Chris's one, like more access, more guardians. So this idea of like citizens of the sea, marine citizenship. You know, we are on a blue planet, and then yet also the bumping up against this challenge that's there, a sticking point that Chris raises around the kind of greenwashing, and how do you wade through all the information we're bombarded with and actually make sense of it. And I don't know, do you want to speak to that first, Hanli, or Tom? I'm sure you've come up against plenty of it from a business point of view.
Sorry, say that question again.
Around Chris's comment around the greenwashing, and how do you kind of like move through that with that kind of authenticity and tact in your actions?
Is that Chris who's in the feed here?
Yeah. Just
Charles's question.
Oh, sorry, Charles. Sorry, Charles.
The feed started to go. I'm trying to keep up with it. Which is great. So thank you very much, everyone. Charles, hello, Charles. Nice to hear from you.
I think Charles is on the right track about just listening to Easkey. It's always a good start.
Oh dear.
I think, Charles, I think and I think, you know, before we start debunking or not so much of what's going on there, I think we have to be real careful curators of the information we consume, as we have to be on all accounts right now in the world. You know, like, I think it's the same in the conservation field and in the ocean access field. You know, I think really find those few trusted voices that you trust, and then follow those, you know. And I think a good start is like Easkey, but also, you know, people like Dr. Jana Johnson and other really trusted voices that, you know, really start finding the ones that you feel, I resonate here. But not only do I resonate, because then it's very easy to just start hearing what you want to hear, but also say, you know, this is a sound voice from a place of heart and science. And starting to find those voices who speak into your decision making and into your reasoning, definitely, because there's a lot of greenwashing going on, and there's also a lot of diversion going on, and I think both of those are problematic.
And I think it's a really interesting point in time. I think there's authenticity, which, you know, there's more information out there for people to judge authenticity, and it's how authentic it really is from from places or businesses or whatever it is. So I think that's a really big one. And you can, do you know what, if you don't see it, you ask the questions. I mean, and that's a big, you know, you all have a voice to be able to interrogate and, you know, make your voice heard. And also I think that, you know, we're B Corp certified as a business, and that for us was quite a big deal about 3.5 years ago, where we actually had a sort of rigorous, independent, third-party assessment of what we're doing as a business, and sort of, you know, doing business in the right way. So you can seek out those kind of marks where there is actually, you know, an independent, rigorous third-party assessment of from our point of view, from business point of view. And I think, you know, just going through certification now, the amount of data that, we're having to now build into some of these facts, and it's really sort of starting to come through. So whether that's labeling or carbon carbon emissions on a jacket for us, or a bit of knitwear, whatever it is, stuff like that, that's kind of the world we're moving to. And I think also another really interesting thing that came out of C7 was this idea of sustainability, and we've got to move the conversation on from just sustainability, which is actually, when you just look at it, is actually pretty boring. It's just like keeping it like this. It should be regenerative. How can we be regenerative as a business, as a culture, with our community, and so that you have it's a net positive effect on every time we do something, and we're nowhere near that. But if I was how can we be a regenerative brand or business, and every touch point it leaves something in a better place than it was. That could be a person, an event, a film we put out, a product, whatever it is, in a better place. So they're all really interesting things, and it's you just have to interrogate, Charles, to answer your question, and don't be frightened of doing so. And it should be it's as good a time to do it as ever, basically.
Yeah. Totally. It's so true. And I just want to quickly speak to David's question, which is so true. Like, people who don't know what they don't know. And to give you a quick example, what we found here in South Africa with the Iron Water programs is that initially we got approached by a lot of other nonprofits, saying like, would you like to take our kids for a snorkel, or can you come and work with the youth we work with, or this at-risk group? And we realized that these are all individuals that in some way have already connected with a caring adult in some way who's offering them something. So then we started working directly with the schools. And as soon as we started working directly with the schools, we were told, oh, this is such a classic one, we'll send you a group of boys after school time. And we're like, why a group of boys? And they said, because none of the girls can swim. And we're like, but that's exactly the people we want to be working with, the ones who never get to go to the beach and never get to go to the ocean. In South Africa, the girls often after school will be helping in the home. They have chores and they play a big role in the running of a household. And so for us, one way, David, of really seeing how can we really target youth who don't know what they don't know is working directly with schools and working with whole grade 7 classes and getting these schools to actually collaborate with us in a way where they will send the whole group during school time, so that it's not an opt-in after school. It's taking a whole class during school time. And you will have, and if you look at some of the videos on our website, there's girls saying, I'm so afraid of the ocean. I've never been in the sea. I can't swim, and afterwards, like, we literally have to drag them out of the water and be like, you're coming back tomorrow. Don't worry, there'll be more, because they had such an incredible experience. So, and I think if you had asked them to opt in, they probably wouldn't have opted in. And I think that's a really interesting. We don't force anybody into the water, I'm just going to be clear, but we coach them in a very, encouraging way to try. Like, everyone can try, and show them how it's possible. And so I think that's just from our way, one example of making sure that we work with the ones who aren't just the obvious.
Yeah, it's so important. I really love your question, David. Because we're guilty of really being in this passion bubble for all things blue, but that's not the case for so many people, the majority of people. And I think it's also about looking at, well, if you go down to the beach, to the sea, to the water, like looking around you, like who's there, and then who's not there, like who's missing and why. And the reasons why mightn't be so obvious, especially from our perspective. So it's really the need, and this is also needing, like the research we're doing as social scientists, needing to address this huge gap in current blue health research of why there's the inequality, is not getting down at that level, of that ground level of first understanding actually what are the needs and barriers, like why some people are there and engaged and others aren't. And so it's also needing to understand those, which means having those conversations at the ground level in these different communities, and really having spaces where we can listen to other people's stories of what their experiences and perspectives are, rather than coming in with ours. So a lot of it is this: how do we create this process of listening, especially those of us who are in this place and space of privilege, who have platforms to give voice. So I'm probably getting, but I think that's a big part of trying to address this as well as then, you know, there's so many different ways of, for example, with women in Iran, it being so much fear around being even in that space, like of the ocean and the beach, and it being so open and public. So kind of taking a step back from the learning to surf part and actually going into creating this sort of safe space of the importance of what that early first introduction is with water, and it being a positive one. And how do you do that? And working with women who have never been immersed in a body of water ever, like not even a bath, and so don't have any, you know, and so this getting into, and we started off in an enclosed swimming pool, just all women, and started off first about storytelling, sharing our experiences and story of what water meant to us, and then tuning into the diversity of emotions and fears, and then being able to support each other once we had that understanding. So yeah, again, it's a deeper, slower, intentional process we need, rather than just coming in and going, ocean's brilliant, everybody get in. Yeah. So.
Definitely. I think we have another 5 minutes or so. So I don't know whether there are any more questions, or Tom and Easkey, if there's anything you guys want to finish up with, then we can share some last thoughts or some, yeah.
Yeah, this conversation's flown by. Like we're just barely scratching the surface.
No, I guess David's question to you is a really good one. You know, it's kind of what can you do about it? You know, how, if you like, I think, you know, that as I said, like you said, in a passion bubble where, you know, everyone's sort of, you know, on the same page and believe the same thing. It's about us going out and spreading that word amongst you know, communities and you know, groups or whatever it is that wouldn't necessarily do that. So it is something that I think is a real challenge, and yeah, we're sort of working quite hard to sort of work out how we can bring that to life and empower people to be able to go off and, you know, to be evangelists for what they believe in, and the power of the water and the importance of the ocean. So yeah, it's a really interesting one, and yeah, we haven't got all the answers yet, personally speaking, but it's something that we're kind of working on. I think you could probably do, I don't think maybe it's daunting as you think, David, and I'm sure if you believe in it, you could go and you get involved locally. I don't know where you live, but you could get involved locally. You could you know, form groups. You can, you know, really, and I think that the power of community, that's where it really comes out, because I think for us, the idea of becoming an ocean advocate, activist, evangelist, whatever you call it, is a brave step, and you have to be honest about it in terms of it being a hard thing to do and being vulnerable, but ultimately you're really hopeful about what it can achieve and the change you believe is possible. So yeah, bravery is a big thing to, you know, to start off with, I think. Yeah, and
well, on that as well, I think like practically what to do is, yeah, like take somebody with you, even if they're a little bit reluctant. And then I've written another book. It's just called 50 Things to Do by the Sea, or 50 Things to Do at the Beach, I think is a US version. But, you know, as my uncle said, I was like, oh, that sounds like a bucket and spade kind of book. But in it, in like kind of stealth mode, is planted in, basically it's about, you know, ocean awareness and ocean actions through this mindfulness-based approach that are just really accessible and explained in a very kind of, I suppose, simple way for anyone. But it's just to sort of start to take the baby steps to build the connection if it's not already there. So there's plenty of ideas in that too.
And then I think, you know, for somebody running a nonprofit, is if you're in a position to support organizations in your area, organizations you resonate with, who are, you believe, really shifting things and who are truly making an impact, then do that in whatever way you can, you know, because I think grassroots organizations like ourselves, you know, it's not always easy to lift one's gaze from the work you're doing to really be able to expand, and that support means so much, support in different ways. So I think, you know, reach out, see how you can help in various ways. That's always so appreciated. And then of course what you can do in your own life. because, you know, the ocean, the way I like to think of it is that this blue planet we live on, wherever you all are that have been listening today and have been joining in, it's not as if we're on different little spots of land and that we're divided by the sea. It's like as soon as we go and we put our feet in the water and put our whole selves in the water, that we are united and we come together. And so the ocean is this great big uniter, and it's not a divider. And I think that's really something that I take with me every time I have this opportunity of connecting with people around the world, that we share so much and we share this ocean. And thank you so much for joining us today and for listening and for engaging with us. It's been so wonderful to speak about what is so close to our hearts and what we all get to protect. We share the privilege and the responsibility. So thank you all. This has been really, really great to be in touch. And Easkey and Tom, you guys are fantastic. I look forward to a world where we can all meet again.
Yay.
Yes, can't wait. It's going to be awesome. Yeah, well, thank you everyone as well. Really, really enjoyed it. And yeah, great questions and everyone being involved. And Hanli, love seeing you as always.
Yeah, loved it. Thanks everyone. Great engagement. Take care.
Yeah, and if you have any more questions for us that you weren't able to ask here, you know, find us online, find our emails or our social media, and please get in touch. We'll be happy to hear from you.